Thanks, Anna. Hi, everyone. This is Neelam Patel from OVW. I hope you guys are having a wonderful Thursday. One quick thing, if you can't hear me or something's going on with the audio, just let us know because I'm moving my chair as close as I can to the phone. But I am the team lead for training technical assistants at OVW, and I am welcoming you all to the orientation. This year we're doing the TA orientation online. We find it to be a little more easier to schedule, but we're also going to be doing a training for new TA providers and new points of contact in February, and I'll get to that later on in the presentation. As I put in the chat box, unfortunately, I do need to end about 5 minutes to 4, but don't worry, I can get through all of the information. I'm always available anytime you need to talk to me, not in the evenings, but work hours. But I'm here, and I will go through some of the information with you right now. So quickly want to go over the list of webinars that we've scheduled for the orientation. Today we have like a quick overview of your requirements with your cooperative agreement. On the 20th, we're going to have a webinar on an introduction to your TA providers. That includes VERA, Ncjfcj TA2TA, API Institute on Gender-Based Violence, and Future Without Violence as well. Number 4 is introduction to your OVW grant financial management. I know that's so exciting. So I'm hoping that some of you have invited your financial folks for that lovely presentation. And then we have December 10th, introduction to the OVW grant management system, which is a wonderful system. If you don't know about it, it's a love-hate relationship you'll have with it. But we will go through all that information for you. Okay, so the goals of this introductory webinar is really just to learn more about OVW, the OVW TA initiative specifically for the new TA organizations and new points of contact. Your responsibility as an OVW TA provider, and I just also want to give you some guidance on working with your OVW Program Specialist to develop and implement your project. So one thing I just wanted to do is, when we have that wonderful chat box there, is how many of you can tell me if you are a new TA organization? And if you're not new TA organization, how long have you been a TA provider? So you can start chatting in the box. We see one person. Oh, 2. Multiple. See what comes up. Let's see. Oh, where'd it go? Oh, 2008, 8 years. Oh, a brand new, stinking new person. Welcome. One for 5 years. And see. So while we still wait to see some more come in, let's see here. Oh, since 2004. Wonderful. Well, thank you all. And this is also, just remember, the TA world is your community as well. So even though we're not in person to meet, you'll meet each other virtually, and we're hoping that we can have more opportunities for TA providers to interact with each other. So just a quick overview of the Formula Grant programs. And you can also type in, oh, we have a new TA provider too. Although, yes, Ruby, we know, yes. But welcome. So a quick overview is, if you're not familiar with OVW, we have different grant programs in office. We have formula grant programs and discretionary grant programs. So we have 4 formula grant programs, and they're written on the slide. And then we've got about 16 discretionary grant programs. And so your funding for all of your TA projects come from the different programs, from the discretionary and the formula. And I'll get to your funding codes in a little bit. One of the things that comes up a lot of questions with new TA providers is, how do I know where my funding is coming from? So I'll definitely walk you through so you can see where exactly, which programs your funding has come from. I see there's another newbie. So welcome, but you've done TA before. Welcome. There's some more of the discussion, and the PowerPoint's available for you as well to download. So I'm going to go over really quickly the discretionary grant, the grants and cooperatives. But one thing I do want to share with you before we move on is sometimes TA providers are asking how many TA projects does OVW have? We have about 170 active TA projects right now and approximately 80 TA organizations. So within those 80 organizations, 170 TA projects. So we're going to go over and talk a little about what's the difference between grants and cooperatives. And this is a question that comes up a lot with new TA providers, because you think of everything as a grant, but with the TA world at OVW, we look at these, we write these as cooperative agreements. So a grant is something like if you're an LAV grantee or culture specific or housing as well, you're getting a grant. So there's not as much involvement with OVW. There's a step thing that you're allowed to do based on the statute of that grant program. You do that. You communicate with your program specialist about anything that you need to develop. But there's not a lot of that hands-on relationship. With a cooperative, there's substantial involvement with OVW. And so we see that more of a partnership with OVW and the TA provider. So we'll get into that a little later about what that means to collaborate with your OVW program specialist. And so as I said earlier too, currently they have 170 active awards, approximately 180 organizations. We have 36 program specialists and associate directors that manage the projects across the office. Some with few, some with not, remembering that most of the program specialists all manage grant loads as well. I manage about 17 TA projects because I don't have a grant load. So our TA projects can be divided into kind of three categories: program specific, issue specific, and audience specific. So the program specific, there's one program for which you are funded to provide that TA. So if you're comprehensive for housing, you're focused just on that grant program. Issue specific is if you're looking at the stalking. So we have a stalking research center specifically on that issue. We have some TA projects specifically on sexual assault. And then there's audience specific as well. So those are like TA that's specifically for law enforcement, prosecutors, advocates, attorneys. So this is something that comes up all the time, is what's the difference between targeted and comprehensive? And I know you all read the solicitation and you applied for your award, but sometimes it's unclear. And so one question I do have is, do you all know if you're targeted or comprehensive? Or if you don't know. So if you know if you're targeted, right, targeted, comprehensive, don't know. So let's see a couple people type stuff in. Comprehensive, targeted. Some of you do have both, a mixture. Targeted. Great. So one of the things to really figure out which one you are is, it's pretty easy. If you look at where you application you applied for, which category was it in, and the solicitation, targeted or comprehensive. Now there are differences between the both, obviously. A targeted is a discrete issue area that we intended to provide OVW grantees with training technical assistance, specific to like a knowledge gap or a promising practice. They're intended to provide like an in-depth TA on a narrow topic within one of our 4 crimes or more of the 4 crimes. And to remember that the continued funding for a targeted purpose area is not always guaranteed. So when you're thinking about your project and your timeline, you're applying for a targeted with the intention that the deliverables of what you're going to deliver to us, whether it's products, TAs, training, will end at that end project period ending. And it doesn't mean that we wouldn't compete that target purpose area in the future, but we never know. So we want to make sure that there isn't a situation where we have a targeted that is thinking about what they would do like for 4 or 5 years and then there's no funding for it. which that comes into comprehensive technical assistance. We have categorized some of our TA projects as comprehensive because we've seen that there's a continued need for that topic area, whether it's a comprehensive for one of the grant programs, like I've mentioned, trans housing, if it's a comprehensive specific for law enforcement and prosecutors, or if it's a comprehensive for one of our resource centers like stalking or firearms. We see there's a consistency that we need that for at least 5 years. After 5 years of funding, if that purpose area is still needed for comprehensive, we will then compete it. We could possibly compete a comprehensive earlier than the 5 years if we feel like we want to take that comprehensive in another direction. And so the comprehensive, you are then required to do a 5-year planning from the beginning and then to really revisit that throughout the 5 years. Oh, and I also want to say, if you do have questions, you can definitely write them in the chat box. The wonderful Brianne Smith from Ncjfcj is going to write down any questions anyone has because it's a little hard for me to look at the screen and my notes and all that at the same time. So definitely feel free to write any questions you have. So now I want to go into your Word documentation. And if you haven't seen a copy of your Word documentation, please make sure you get a copy from whomever receives the information. It has lots of important information that you need to implement your project. Sometimes what we've noticed is that the authorized representative is the one who gets the Word information, but sometimes it doesn't trickle down to the worker bees that are working on the TA project. So it's important that they have that information. So your Word documentation includes your Word letter, which includes the project title, and then it's broken down into other letters, but the main bulk of it is your special condition. So you definitely want to go through your whole cooperative agreement and look at when the project start end date is, the amount, making sure the authorized representative is correct, make sure the point of contact is correct. We'll talk a little more about how you change that in the grant management system in that webinar in a few weeks. One of the things to also just let me know is you can always contact me if you have a question about who should be your direct point of contact as well on that award. So here are the funding codes that I was talking about. So in your award document, in the award letter that kind of is the summary of the cooperative agreement, there's going to be a box on the left side. And as I said, I can definitely sit down with any of you virtually on the phone. If you're local, I will just hike over to you and walk you through that document as well to see what the funding codes are. So the next two slides are all the funding codes. And whatever codes you have and the amount of money is the amount of money that comes from that program to fund that project. Also, when we get into the recipient responsibilities, you'll see in the first line in most of the awards that will say which grant programs you will be targeting for your project. So to keep in mind, you might have focused on all the grant programs in your application or some other ones that you're not funded for. So just to make sure you know which ones they're for. And you can also reach out to potential grantees as well for webinars and TA and some of the trainings additionally. So if you have questions about what that would look like, definitely talk to your program specialist, but we can walk through that as well. So the next couple slides, these are always good to have. I have them all memorized now. It's a good game to play if you want to test me, but yeah, it's all here for you to have. All right, special conditions, so wonderful to go through. Just make sure you have copies of it, like I said before, and you read through them carefully. I'm not going to be able to go through all of them with you. I've highlighted a couple that I definitely want to make sure we go over because sometimes there's been a lot of questions and confusion about those specific ones. one thing that we'll go through later too is what your recipient responsibilities are in the special condition. Any changes to those you have to discuss with your program specialist and get approved from them in advance. All right, so here we go with some of the special conditions. Now the numbering is from the 2019 award. So if you do not have a 2019 award, I've included the title right here at the top after the number, so you can also refer to that directly. So the first one is the OVW Training Guiding Principles for Recipients and Subrecipients. So that's number 11 for the 2019 award, is that making sure that you're adhering to the OVW Training Guiding Principles of grantees and subgrantees. There's a link to it. And I copied the information from the link. And so just make sure you review that. If you have questions about it, just let me know. And I feel like this special condition kind of encompasses the entire TA initiative about really what we're looking for training and technical assistance. Then now we'll move on to 28, which is the approved activities. So the full name of it is Limitation on Use of Funds for Approved Activities. So making sure when you look at your recipient responsibilities, and we'll talk about that a little later, is that you are using the funds for specifically what you were funded for, and for the purpose area for which you were funded for. Sometimes we see some recipients, TA providers, start to do some work that is outside the scope of what they were funded to do under that purpose area. And sometimes they come back and say, well, we can do it because it's allowable, but it might not be allowable for you to do that work with this award, because remember where your funding is coming from. So each grant program also has requirements into what you can do with each program. So when we decide and make the determination of which grant programs will fund each TA project, it's also based on what's allowable in that grant program. 34 and 35 kind of both go together. It's the submission of your progress reports and your quarterly financial reports. And for the newbies, we will be going through the grant management system later in a couple of weeks, so you'll learn more about how do you submit your progress reports and your financial reports. And you will be getting, hopefully, information from the Muskie School, who will be doing some webinars for TA providers on submitting and filling out your progress report. So a couple of the key things to keep in mind is that your reports for both of them, the progress reports are due every 6 months, and it's due by the 30th of the month it's due. So the reporting period from January to June is due July 30th, and when you're covering July to December, it's due January 30th. What gets a lot of people confused, they think end of the month, and then they think the 31st. And that's wrong, and then as soon as you're late, then your funding gets put on hold, even if it's late by an hour. And then it's in GMS as a hold until you submit it, and then it's a release. But multiple holds may impact future funding. So just definitely keep that in mind. We will probably go over the quarterly financial reports through with GFMD and some of the areas that we've seen in the reports as well, but definitely for the submission and for how you're filling it out, follow your special conditions. All right, program income. And this is always a tricky one, right? Because I think some TA projects may also do similar work that they're getting funded from OVW, or they're trying to supplement the funding and they might be asking for program income. And particularly, some TA providers may ask for program income to go to a training and training them. So one thing to keep in mind is if you're going to collect income, it must be deducted from the total allowable cost. Now, this can be really tricky, and I think it's a case-by-case basis. So if you feel as if you're going to be getting program income, contact your program specialist, contact GFMD, and contact me. We can walk through it with you. The MOU changes. You know, sometimes in your projects, the MOU partners that you had in your application might change. The signatory might change. The work they might do changes. So if there are changes to your MOU, we do need them submitted into GMS, the Grant Management System, as a program office approval, so that way we have a record of it. But definitely work with your program specialist if you feel there's a necessary change to your MOU partnership. Number 39, which is prior approval of all materials and publications. This is any materials for training, any materials you're doing for on-site TA training, any resources you're producing, any videos, anything that you're doing must be submitted not less than 20 days to complete the review and approval. One of the things to keep in mind is what is the date you need to have final approval? What is the date you need to have it submitted? So like let's say you're presenting at a conference and you need to have the PowerPoint done 5 days before to send it to them. So when do you need OVW to review your materials? Work backwards with your timeline so that way you're not getting yourself into a situation that, oh, we need to get it the next day, and then OVW has multiple edits and comments to it. I think we get into that situation more when there's PowerPoints that need to be submitted for another conference, or you're doing an on-site training or TA and you have all these materials. I think for other written materials, particularly any resources or guidebooks, bench books, video scripts, you're working with your program specialist on that information and on those products on a regular basis. So there might be some ongoing review of the materials, but also work with them on when you need to submit final review and approval for that. The OVW publication disclaimer, number 40, that needs to be on everything that was OVW produced. One thing that I've seen in the past is some TA providers tend to modify that language. We ask that you do not modify that language at all. Just write it the way it is and put your award number on it. And it's important to have that on all the information that you distribute. Copyright provision of all awards. I know this is a hot topic. This came up at our all TA provider meeting last year. And it could be sometimes complicated about what is produced by the TA provider, what did the consultant bring in. But the overall arching thing to remember is that anything that's produced, OVW also owns, and OVW reserve a royalty-free, non-exclusive right to reproduce, publish, or otherwise use the work. So to remember that, yes, you as a TA provider produced it, but we also own it. Number 43 is, where are you, number 43? It is the technical provider training requirements. So like the orientation, which is its own special condition, is we require TA providers to also get training so that they become effective, efficient TA providers along the way. Some of the trainings that we do require is the Vera Institute accessibility training. I'm not sure if any of you have been to accessibility training. If you have, just write it in the box. But if you, definitely if you're new, I know you haven't been. So the accessibility training is fabulous, and everyone, all TA programs are required to go to that. And I do keep track of who's gone to it. So there's that one. Futures on Violence has an Iowa training, which they do a couple of different types of trainings. And you'll hear more about this in the webinar next 2 weeks. And we sometimes have all TA provider meetings that you're going to be required to go to. And then this year, in February, we're going to be doing a training for TA providers on really how to implement and develop your projects, a little more hands-on work. So you would be required to go that if you're a new TA provider. So the consultant rate, that's a big one too. So as you see in your special conditions, and many of you know, that the maximum consultant rate is $650 a day, which ends up being $81.25 an hour. One of the things you're going to need to keep in mind is what is the going rate of the consultant that you want to use. Not everyone has a consultant rate of $650 a day. And We had an OVW audit of the TA program a couple years ago, last year actually, and one of the things was the use of the consultant rate of the 650 throughout many of our projects. And so one of the things you really need to keep in mind is if you're going to use consultant A, do you have documentation showing that consultant A's rate is this amount? And if not, what is that consultant's going rate? And you'll need to make sure you keep that as a documentation for you. So 45 is the prior approval required before entering into contract or expending funds for conferences. So the next couple, 45, 46, 47, 48, are the wonderful conference request form information. How many of you on the line have done OVW conference request form? And how many of you love it? I'm pretty sure none of you love it, but there could be a few of you that love it. And then if you do, I want to be your friend. So we have some webinars that are saved on the TA2TA website on conference request forms and filling them out. We are hopeful to plan a training, a webinar, a couple of them in January and February to go through the conference forms and how to fill them out. So if you haven't yet and you have in-person events in your deliverables, don't worry. We are here to hold your hand. We will walk you through it. We will go through it. TA2TA is also a great mentor and a TA provider for you to kind of give you their best practices. So they have done multiple of them as well. So don't be feeling overwhelmed by it. But the one thing to keep in mind with number 45, if you are submitting a conference form, and you would be submitting a conference form if you're going to be entering into any contract with a hotel or venue, you must receive prior approval through the conference request form before you enter into that contract. We have seen in the past that sometimes TA providers will sign a contract with a hotel worried that it's going to take too long to get the conference form approved, and then it doesn't get approved, or there needs to be modifications to the amount, and then they're stuck with it. So definitely make sure you don't sign anything until you get that approval. There's also 46 and 47, gives you guidance on cost of logistical conference planning, cost of programmatic conference planning. It might seem a little confusing right now if you're new, not really understanding what the conference request form process is. But again, if you are doing any in-person events and you're new, please contact me. I will sit down with you and walk through with you what that requirement is. And then we want to make sure you get onto that webinar that we do later on as well. But we can also walk through with you with that first form. And 48 is that conference-based audiovisual equipment and services special condition. There's also the trinkets. There we go. Prohibition trinkets. Trinkets are pretty much everything now. Trinkets are pens, trinkets are ribbons, trinkets are, magnets. So can't have any of those, and no food and beverage at conferences. There are some situations where there are exceptions to the food and beverage, particularly if you are in a location where there are nothing else available. I think of like when we do some training TA in tribal communities. So that's some exceptions to that. And then 52 talks about the reporting process afterwards, after the conference and training is completed. And when we say conference form, this is specific for the new folks, it's not just what you think of a conference, it's also meetings, trainings that you put on roundtables, focus groups for which there are costs that will be contributed to that event. And we can definitely go through that a little more with you. I think sometimes we get tied up with the terminology of conference versus training versus on-site versus all of that information, but we'll go over that definitely more so in the in-person training as well. So this is what I like to call the meat and potatoes of your cooperative agreement, the federal responsibilities and the recipient responsibilities. And they are written in a way that pretty much says what we as OVW, as your program specialist, will do, and what you as a recipient of the TA project is required to do. So when you look at the recipient responsibility, it tells you really what our role is. And if you remember earlier in the webinar, when I talked about being a cooperative agreement, it's really substantial partnership between the federal government and the recipient. So we are partners in this project, and we all have responsibilities to making sure that the TA project that was funded is implemented successfully. So when you think about those federal responsibilities, you'll see that the federal responsibilities and the recipient responsibilities, parts of it are mirror images. So we write what we're going to do, and then the recipient responsibility, we have it written in a way that you understand that this is what we're going to do. There's also a part in the earlier part of the recipient responsibilities that really talks and breaks down what you're going to deliver with this TA project. So I'm going to get to that slide now. So for some of you, you'll see that it'll say that you're going to do 3 to 4 webinars on this topic, 2 to 6 regional training, create a bench book. We take that information from your application, but it could be modified based on what OVW really wants you to do on this project. So it might look different than what you propose your application. But I'll talk about after this is really about how do you plan your project with your OVW program specialist. If you're seeing there's some things that are different or confusing, it's really important to have that conversation with your program specialist and make sure you're all on the same page of what that deliverables will look like. So definitely go through it, highlight it, circle things, questions you might have, and so when you do your planning meeting with your program specialist, you can bring those topics up. And then there's also parts in the recipient responsibilities, and if you look down to kind of the statement, there's a lot of information in there that's kind of duplicative of your special condition. It's talking about conference forms. It's talking about getting approval for any of the meetings and the dates and locations, putting your information on TA2TA, submitting everything through the grant management system, going to the creating accessible training, which is part of the special condition I mentioned before, the technical assistance. So to definitely go through that and look at it and what exactly you're going to do. And you'll see if you look at your first one, for most of you, it does say the grant program for which you are funded under this project. So your responsibilities are just planning of the in-person events, submitting the conference form, submitting a revised timeline, posting your events on TA2TA and uploading your materials on TA2TA, and attending OVW TA-specific training. I definitely want to go into the timeline and the project planning right now because I feel like that's an important thing to go over earlier in your project. And even for those of you who have projects that have been going on for a while, I feel like best practice is to have a meeting with your TA provider, your OVW program specialist. You're meeting with them regardless throughout the year through phone or in person or virtually, but to do a project planning at the start of every fiscal year to see what have we met on our special conditions, the deliverables, what do we have left, what are some emerging issues that we want to bring up in terms of topics for webinars or products, are there any deliverables that need to be changed. So this is really when you look back at your special conditions, particularly for the new ones, new TA providers, is what's gelling with you? What do you really feel like, yes, this makes sense? Or, oh, this is written in a way that I don't understand. Let's have that meeting. I tend to like to meet with my TA projects in October, November, December to walk through everything with them and to see what's expected of me throughout the year and the timeline. When are some like blackout dates for me? What are blackout dates for the TA provider? Start planning events and putting them on the TA2TA calendar. Start planning events, putting on our own calendars. So if your TA OVW program specialist hasn't reached out to you yet, I recommend you reach out to them to see, hey, could we plan something early in the next couple of months to go through the project. If you are having some difficulty getting in touch with your OVW Program Specialist or might not know who your OVW Program Specialist is because that point of contact may change or might have changed after the award letters were gone out, feel free to contact me. I will help you navigate that system and to help you out if you need help with the project planning. During your meeting with your OVW Program Specialist, definitely go over your award documentation and the responsibilities, the description of the project, anything that you put in your application that wasn't added into the recipient responsibilities that you're just wondering why that wasn't added and just getting some explanation for that. And then finalize any changes to the deliverables and timeline. Now, things change throughout our project. We know that. There's sometimes the conference forum definitely took much longer than we anticipated, or there were changes, or you had to change your date, or your consultant that was working on a product is no longer available. So that timeline will change, and I think timelines should be fluid enough for those modifications, but that they should also be real solid. So if you have multiple projects, TA projects, or you have multiple other requirements in your office, because I know you all are busy, you're juggling 10, 20, 30 things at once, that sometimes things need to be scheduled in a way so you can meet your other requirements in your office. Okay, so I feel as if most of you might have been already contacted for any revisions to your budget. One of the special conditions you'll see is that, well, I think none of you had access to your funding right when you got the award document because your budget still needs to get approved from GFMD. So I'll just let you know, GFMD, they're just rock stars and they work really hard. There's about 4 or 5 of them that are clearing all the budgets for the entire program division, as well as budget modifications, other grant adjustments, indirect cost rates, all of that. So most of the budgets have already been submitted to GFMD to start working on, so I'm hoping some of you have already sort of been contacted. If you have questions to kind of figure out where your budget is in the process, you can contact your program specialist, you can contact me, and we can take a check-in look into that. But submit to OVW any updates you have the timeline deliverables through the grant management system. So just make sure, and we'll talk more about the grant management system. Like I said, there's a love-hate. Most of the time I love it because it is a good record keeping of everything. Everything that should be submitted is in that system. And so if I were your program specialist and I'm no longer a program specialist at OVW, that someone else can go in and see the record of everything. And so you want to make sure you talk to your program specialist about what is their process for submitting materials to them. Is it by email first? Is it by GMS? I tend to kind of work both ways. If I know it's something that's really time-consuming, like a video script or a bench book or something we've been working on for a while, I like to see the versions by email over and over rather than having everything submitted by GMS. If it's PowerPoints, I usually like them through GMS, but it just depends. And that's part of the flexibility that we should be, as program specialists, work with you on and give you that flexibility to what works with our deliverables. And the most important thing to do during your program planning with your TA OVW Program Specialist is to discuss a regular scheduled meeting with the program specialist. Whether you're going to talk once a month, or you're going to talk every other week. Brianne can attest to it. We talk not just every week, we talk all the time. It just depends on the project that you have. And so setting up that regular call is important. Knowing that our schedules do change, like you guys are always busy, we're busy, but making sure you have something on the books and on your calendar that you're able to say, we have this call, what do we have on our agenda? So the timeline, we talked about this a little earlier as well. It could be different than what you submitted with your application when you finalize it with your OVW Program Specialist. So that first 12 months of your project should be finalized during your meeting with your program specialist. I feel like best practice is kind of revisit it every 6 months as you continue the project for the remainder of the project to see what else needs to be done. It's sometimes hard to do it every 6 months. We have so many things that are going we're all so busy, but just keeping it on the front end, just making sure that we're always checking in and seeing if we have things that are coming up that are going to take a chunk of our time, but we still want to move on this project. Where can we slow down a little? Where can we pick up again? And so things to keep in mind is the collaborative meeting calls with your partners and their own timeline. So like all of us, we're always so busy. Your partners and your consultants are also probably juggling multiple projects. So as you're working on the timeline and you might have to bring in your consultants, you're going to want to make sure you know what their blackout dates are for deliverables. When can they get stuff to you? I think one of the challenges I've seen is when you don't have those conversations with them on the front end, and as the lead TA provider, you're promising we can get this to you by this date, and then you go back to your partners and they say, hey, that's not going to work for us. When else can we do it? It just kind of throws everything in your timeline up in kind of smoke, and you've got to kind of redo it again. So another thing that comes up a lot too is, I saw like Allison wrote that they have multiple TA projects. So if you have multiple OVW or non-OVW projects and staffing is kind of split between all of them, so let's say I'm working on a TA project, but I also have 3 other projects I'm working on. What is your staffing availability? I've done this with one of my TA projects. For example, this is one example, is they've got a couple of projects. So when we do our timeline, they incorporate all of their other timelines into that timeline. So when we're blacking it out, we're also blacking out for this project and this project. When can we get things done? And it's just being realistic about it. I think as a program specialist, I can respect and understand where y'all are coming from in terms of what's a realistic timeline. So working on that on the front end will help you at the back end of when things need to get done. And so another thing to put in your timeline during your project planning is when things need to get reviewed by OVW. I've started working with my TA providers and my own calendar as well, is that when am I going to get materials that need to be reviewed? When do you need to get it back from me? And I put on my calendar Outlook the reminders, because then I know when I need to get things done. And there is that 20-day review process that most of the OVW program specialists do like to follow. So knowing that as well, keeping that in your timeline of when things are going to get submitted. And even also when you're looking at conference request forms, agendas, getting locations, all of that needs to be in your timeline as well. As many of you know, when you've tried to work on developing, finding sites for training and developing a conference form, it takes a lot longer than you think. With conference forms, and for those of you that are new, I apologize if a lot of this is going over your head, we require that conference request forms are submitted at least 90 days from when you need to know. I think sometimes people think it's 90 days from the event. That's not true. It's 90 days from when you need to know, which means when do you need to have that contract signed by the hotel before the hotel's like, we're going to go another route. And we could lose the hotel regardless during the whole request form process. But that needs to be in the form and your timeline as well, along with how long it's going to take you to look for a location, how long to put together the agenda, when are you going to finalize that agenda, when you're going to submit the form, when you'll be able to get the materials, when you get edits and file submission. I found in my experience for training, you're looking at like a 6 to 9 month planning from beginning to the end, to the event. So keeping that in mind will also help you when you're planning what are the dates that seem to work to have this event. So I think of this as kind of the 3 C's when you're thinking about working with your program specialist: collaboration, coordination, communication. It's everything we kind of talked about throughout the PowerPoint so far. This is a collaboration between OVW and the program, the TA provider, on the project. So collaboration is important. That's the coordinating of the time, the communication of when we're going to meet, talk, when our things due. And the collaboration part is really important where, you know, as OVW Program Specialist, we're not in the field much. You know, we're talking to the grantees. You guys have your ear to the ground. We have our ear to the ground with the grantees. But we all come with some type of expertise on the topic and the area for which you're doing the TA work. So it's making sure we have that give and take and conversation about where the direction of the project goes, and that we're collaborating on the development of it, and that we're really talking about what is the best way for us to communicate as a team, what works for all of us, what doesn't work, and having that open communication. And scheduling those meetings on a regular basis has been, in my experience, the best thing with work with the TA project. It keeps me in check to make sure as your program specialist, I know what I have to do, and that if I drop the ball, you'll let me know, and vice versa as well. So when you're thinking about it and you're doing your program planning with your program specialist, think about the 3 C's and making sure you're incorporating that into your planning. So we've talked a little about what award activities look like, and so I wanted to keep the slide in there because there's so many things that people think about in terms of what an activity is. So when I talked about earlier that a training could be a conference could be a training, it is. It's meetings and roundtables when you do curriculum meeting development, trainings for grantees, whether it's national, regional, webinar, e-learning, on-site TA, when you're doing faculty meetings. As TA providers, you also have this community of other TA providers that you might be invited to present at other TA provider trainings or non-TA provider trainings, and then ongoing TA with the grantees and the different ways that you're doing it. And it's also developing the products and the deliverables and the bench books and all that. So looking through, when you look at through your special conditions, what are you actually doing? I do want to hone in a little on the last one, on the ongoing TA, and you'll hear me talk about this a little more in the in-person, but anytime you get me to talk to you and you want to talk to me, I will keep talking about TA, TA, TA. I feel like the TA part gets lost a lot in the training, that we focus so much on the actual physical, tangible deliverables of training and products that we tend to forget that ongoing TA. Making sure that the grantees know that they can contact you if they have questions, that you can provide that one-on-one TA. I've had some of my TA providers now really focusing on how to do that virtual technical assistance, and what they've been doing is doing Adobe webinars on Skype, specific for a group of grantees in one organization, and do regular, it's like a weekly thing for a month, for an hour. So how does TA look different now in 2020? And are you making that outreach to your grantees and getting those numbers up? Because I do look at those TA numbers and just kind of see, we give all this training, but are we doing follow-up afterwards for TA? And we have a lot of different webinars. This is now going into kind of like the requirements of being a TA provider, and the link is at TA2TA.org. It's on here. If I think for the new folks, I sent the chart of all these webinars that you need to review and then return to me. If you're a new point of contact, you want that chart, please contact Brianna. She'll send it to you. But if you are a new TA provider, you are required to view all these webinars. The conference request ones you can definitely review. We're going to do live webinars of those hopefully in January, and hopefully some good Q&A as well. But definitely please review all of these if you're a new TA provider. And you have questions, just let me know. Yes, Brianne can help with everything too, if you need any help with any of it. And save the date. So for new TA providers and new points of contact, TA2TA, OVW, and our other TA partners on TA2TA, Vera, API, and Futures, will be holding a training for the new TA providers, new points of contact. During this training, we're going to delve deeper into what it means to be an OVW TA provider. What does OVW TA mean? What does it mean to deliver effective training? So we'll go over a little more about agenda writing, evaluation, hands-on some work for the new TA providers, because these are areas that we've seen there have been some gaps and some challenges in developing those agendas, in understanding training skills, and developing curriculum and evaluations. So if you're interested, definitely let Brianne know. We'll send an email to everyone who's registered for all the webinars once the conference form is approved. And if you have questions, here's my email address. You can email me all the time, any time of the day. Evenings, I do stay late often. Allison can understand that. She knows that from before. So does Brianne. If you need anything, just please contact me. You can also call me. My phone number is 202-353-4338. And I'm open to any questions. I know that was really fast and quick as an orientation, but I always see the orientation webinar as just being an introductory, that our partnership will be for the life of your project, that I'm here if you need anything. Your program specialist can help you out as well. We also, Brianne and I also want you to be open with us about what other webinars you would like to see. If it's anything about developing your TA project, some information about how to work, do a PowerPoint, how to work on a curriculum, to anything that's specific to the special conditions that you want information on. If it's not a webinar, but if there's anything you need from us, to let us know, and we're definitely here to help you out. I have a few minutes before I have to log off. Are there any questions? Comments? Excitement? No? Let's see, Allison's typing. Oh yes, conference forms. I have a love-hate again with that too, but I kind of like conference forms. So if you got challenges with it, definitely let me know. I know Brianne likes them too. Calling Brianne out. Yeah, on that end. So anything else? I really appreciate all of you taking the time to listen to me go over your special conditions and projects. I wish you all the best on your projects, and again, hope you can sit in on all the other webinars. If you need anything, I'm here for you. And yeah, it's just a quick webinar, just go over everything. Go through the PowerPoint, go through your special conditions, and kind of highlight what you feel are questions you might have. And then let me know if you need help with setting up your planning meetings. Let me know, and I can help you, guide you through that as well. So bye, everyone. Have a nice weekend, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.